What if your reflection wasn't you? Tonight's story takes place in a quiet house on a lonely street. A young woman is about to discover that her mirror holds a terrifying secret, one that will change everything she believes about herself. It was a cold night in February 3rd, 2023 to be exact, when Emma Barnes first noticed it. Her house stood on the outskirts of a quiet suburban street, isolated and filled with the kind of silence that can only come from the dark hours of the night. The world outside her bedroom window was shrouded in a heavy fog, thick and oppressive, and the distant hum of the city felt miles away. Inside her room, the clock ticked loudly in the corner, the only sound breaking the eerie stillness. Emma sat in front of her full-length mirror, brushing her hair. The soft bristles of the brush moved through her long brown locks in rhythmic motions, and the reflection stared back at her, a reflection that for a moment seemed too still. She paused. Something was off. She squinted at the mirror. Her reflection remained the same, just her, brushing her hair as expected. But then, out of the corner of her eye, she noticed it. Her reflection's hand moved without her. It wasn't a large movement, just a slight twitch of the fingers, a subtle shift in the mirror that wasn't in sync with her own hand. She froze, staring at it. For a brief moment, Emma thought she might have been imagining it. But no, there it was again. The reflection's fingers twitched, then curled into a fist, as if it was trying to communicate. "Hello?" Emma whispered, her voice trembling. Her reflection's mouth didn't move, but she could feel something in the air, an unspoken connection between herself and the glass. "I see you," came a voice, not from her mouth, but from the mirror itself. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She stood up, backing away from the mirror slowly. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. The reflection didn't respond. Instead, it began to move on its own, completely independent of her actions. It raised its arm, mimicking her movements, but with unnatural jerks. Then, with terrifying clarity, it turned to face her directly. The reflection's eyes locked with hers, unblinking, unfeeling. "You don't know what you've done," the voice spoke again. Only this time, it echoed in her mind. "You should have never looked too deeply." Emma's body froze. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to sound brave, though her breath caught in her throat. "What do you want?" The reflection's eyes darkened, and its face twisted into a sinister grin, wide and unnaturally stretched. "I am you," it said, voice dripping with malice. "I was trapped, waiting for you to look." Emma stumbled backward, her back hitting the wall. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the mirror, horrified by the reflection that was now smirking at her, speaking things. She had never told anyone. "You have seen me now, you invited me in, and now you will know the truth about your fate." Emma's mind raced. She had no idea what the reflection meant, but her instincts screamed at her to run, to escape. The air around her grew colder, and the room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in with each passing second. "Your fate is sealed," the voice echoed again. "You've always known. You've always felt it, haven't you?" Emma clutched her chest, her heart pounding in panic. She couldn't breathe. The room felt suffocating. "It's too late now," the reflection whispered, its smile widening. "The mirror always gets the last laugh." Suddenly, the reflection reached out, its hand coming toward her, its fingers stretching unnaturally long. Before Emma could react, a cold, invisible force seemed to grip her by the chest, pulling her forward toward the mirror. Her reflection moved to match her, but with an eerie delay, as if it was the one in control. And then, silence. When the room grew quiet again, everything was still. Emma was gone. Her body was nowhere to be seen. The mirror, however, reflected her perfectly. Her face frozen in an expression of fear, her hands pressed against the glass. But that wasn't all. There, in the corner of the mirror, the reflection's smile grew wider, stretching impossibly beyond human limits, until it filled the entire surface. The reflection tilted its head, and in a voice that sounded far too much like Emma's, it whispered, "The last thing you'll ever see is me." It was a damp and quiet Friday night, October 17, 2014, when Daniel Rhodes found himself driving alone down an unmarked back road in Claiborne County, Mississippi. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the road was still slick and the air was heavy with fog. His life was in ruins. His wife had left, his business had collapsed, and the debt collectors were circling like vultures. He wasn't heading anywhere in particular, just away. With no cell signal and a dying sense of direction, Daniel relied on instinct and the cracked, winding pavement beneath his tires. At 11:56 p.m., he came upon a crossroads. 4 dark paths meeting in the middle of nowhere. There were no street signs, no lights, no houses, just asphalt and silence. Suddenly, the engine sputtered, then died. Daniel muttered a curse, hitting the steering wheel. The gas tank was half full. The battery wasn't dead. Still, the car refused to start. That's when he noticed it. The silence wasn't natural. There were no insects, no wind, no night birds. Just a stillness so deep it made his ears ring. And then, footsteps. From the shadows, a man emerged. He was tall and lean, wearing a crisp black suit and polished shoes that gleamed despite the mud. A wide-brimmed hat covered his face, but his voice carried smoothly through the cold Mississippi air. "You look like a man who's reached his end," the stranger said, "but perhaps not without options." Daniel stepped back instinctively. "Do you live around here?" The man gave a knowing smile. "I live where I'm needed." From his coat, he pulled out a silver pocket watch. It didn't tick, it pulsed, softly glowing like a living thing. "I can offer you a way out," the stranger said. "A fresh start, money, peace, purpose. Your life, rebuilt from the ground up." Daniel squinted through the fog. "And what do you want in return?" The stranger tilted his head slightly. "Something small. You won't miss it, not now." It was insane, but Daniel had nothing left to lose. He reached out, and they shook hands. The moment their palms touched, the car's headlights flickered back on. The dashboard lit up, the engine purred, and the stranger simply vanished into the fog. What followed felt like a dream. Within days, Daniel landed a new job. His bank account surged. His ex-wife apologized. For the first time in years, everything seemed right. But it didn't last. The dreams began first. Visions of empty roads, distant whispers, and a man in a black suit watching from behind the trees. Then came the waking hallucinations, seeing himself in mirrors where his reflection smiled back, even when he didn't. Hearing footsteps behind him at night, feeling a cold hand brush against his shoulder in empty rooms. Then one night, Daniel vanished. He woke, not in his bed, but at the crossroads. Same place, same moonlight, same silence. Except this time, he hadn't driven there. The stranger was waiting. "You've had your time," he said. "Now I'll take what's mine." Daniel trembled. "You said it was something small." The smile widened, inhuman, splitting far too wide. "It is. Just your name, your face, your place in the world." Daniel screamed, but the fog swallowed it whole. He was never seen again. To this day, locals say the crossroads near Old Hollow Road in Claiborne County carries a curse. They say if you pass through it alone on a Friday night in October, and if you're desperate enough, you might meet a man in a black suit. He'll offer you a deal, and when you shake his hand, you'll never feel like yourself again. Liam Carter wasn't superstitious, at least not until that week in November. It started on Saturday, November 12, 2022. He was living alone in a tired old apartment building in East Detroit, the kind where the walls are paper thin and the elevators never work past the 3rd floor. He'd just gotten out of a messy breakup, buried in work and barely sleeping. So when he heard the knock the first night at exactly 3:00 a.m., he assumed it was a fluke, a dream. Asterisk, knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps. He checked the peephole, no one. He opened the door, silence. The hallway was empty and still. The second night it happened again. Same time, same 3 knocks, no one there. By the 3rd night, Liam was starting to get nervous. He even texted the building manager, asking about late-night staff or maybe a neighbor messing around. No one knew anything. He set up a chair in front of the door with a bat in his lap and waited. At 2:55 a.m., the air turned strangely cold. The lights above flickered for a moment. And then, asterisk, knock, knock, knock. He jumped up, flung the door open, and again, no one. But this time, there were wet footprints just outside his door, leading nowhere, fading into the dusty hallway floor. He left the lights on all night. By night 4, Liam was unraveling. He kept his phone camera ready, hoping to catch whoever or whatever was behind it. He even left a sticky note on the door. Asterisk, I hear you. Stop. That night, the knocks came as usual, 3 a.m. But this time, when he opened the door, the note had been peeled off and was now stuck on the asterisk inside asterisk of the door. That meant someone or something had been inside. The camera, it recorded nothing, just static at 3 a.m. Every night the same, blurry lines, distortion, like something didn't want to be seen. On night 5, Liam finally broke. At exactly 2:59 a.m., the lights flickered again. And then, asterisk knock, knock, knock. But this time he didn't wait. He opened the door wide, and what stood there wasn't a person. It had the outline of a man, but its skin was waterlogged and gray, like it had been pulled from the bottom of a river. Its eyes were wide, glassy, and pitch black, reflecting nothing. Its mouth hung slightly open, and from inside, he heard the sound of rushing water. It stepped forward without a sound, leaving wet, inky footprints on the hardwood. Liam couldn't move. The air grew thick, humid, almost suffocating. His ears filled with whispers, not words, but distant, frantic voices drowned in water. The thing tilted its head, and then it said, in a voice that was his own, "You let me in." Liam blacked out. When he woke, the apartment was exactly the same, except for one thing, his reflection. It was wrong. It moved a half-second too slow. Its eyes were glassy and dark. And when he turned to look away, the reflection kept watching him. No one's heard from Liam Carter since that night. His apartment remains empty, rent unpaid, belongings untouched. But building residents whisper about apartment 3B. They say if you walk by at 3 a.m., you'll hear wet footsteps and knocking, soft and deliberate. Sometimes, if you look at the door long enough, you'll see a face behind the peephole. But don't open it, because once you do, it doesn't leave alone. The dense trees of Pine Hollow National Forest seemed to stretch on forever, casting long shadows as the late afternoon sun began to dip below the horizon. A light breeze stirred the dry leaves at the base of the trees, and the forest felt eerily quiet. Too quiet for a place that was supposed to be alive with wildlife. Mark Thompson had been hiking for hours, his water bottle long emptied and his legs aching from the rough terrain. He had been following the trail for what felt like an eternity, but the more he walked, the more disoriented he became. The landmarks he remembered were nowhere to be found. The trail markers had all but disappeared, and as nightfall began creeping in, the forest seemed to close in around him. He had no choice but to keep moving. As darkness settled over the forest, Mark spotted a faint glow through the trees, light, soft, and warm, flickering like the flame of a fire. His heart lifted, hoping for a campsite, or at least someone to help him find his way out. He pushed through the thick underbrush, stumbling over roots and rocks, until he reached a small clearing. In the middle of the clearing was a campfire, its flames crackling in the cold night air. Sitting beside it, a man in his mid-40s with a rugged face and weathered clothes looked up as Mark approached. His expression was calm, kind, and welcoming. "Lost, huh?" the man asked, his voice deep and gravelly. "It's easy to get turned around out here." Mark nodded gratefully, feeling the weight of exhaustion hit him all at once. "Yeah, I've been wandering for hours. Thought I'd never find anyone." The man smiled. "Well, you found me. Come on, sit by the fire. I've got some extra food, and we can figure out where you're headed." Mark hesitated for only a moment, then lowered himself onto the log next to the fire. The warmth felt like heaven against his chilled skin. The man handed him a canteen of water, which he drank down greedily. As the fire crackled and the man spoke in soft, comforting tones, Mark began to feel a strange sense of unease. There was something familiar about this man, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He couldn't put his finger on it. "How long have you been out here?" Mark asked, trying to mask his discomfort. The man looked up at the sky, his eyes distant for a moment. "Longer than I should have, I suppose. Too long, really." Mark furrowed his brow. "Too long?" The man's eyes shifted back to him, his face unreadable. "I've been out here for years. The forest has a way of keeping you longer than you expect. The fire flickered again, casting strange shadows across the man's face. Mark's stomach twisted. "Too long?" Mark whispered, unease creeping in. He looked down at his boots, then back at the stranger. "Who are you?" Mark asked, his voice hesitant. The man grinned, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just someone who found peace in the woods. I never wanted to leave." Mark's gaze shifted to the ground, and that's when he noticed something chilling. The man wasn't casting a shadow. The flames from the campfire danced across the forest floor, illuminating everything around them. But no matter how the light flickered, the man remained without a shadow. Mark blinked, certain his mind was playing tricks on him. But as he looked back at the man, the strange feeling in his gut deepened. "Something wrong?" the man asked, his voice almost too smooth, too polite. Mark stood up abruptly, his breath shallow. "Who are you? Really?" The man's smile grew wider, revealing teeth too sharp for comfort. "I told you, I'm just someone who found peace here. But you're the one who doesn't belong." Mark's pulse quickened, his eyes darting around. The clearing. He could feel the weight of the forest pressing in on him, the air suddenly thick and suffocating. "You're not real," Mark whispered, his voice trembling. The man's grin faded, and for the first time his expression became cold, empty. "You should have stayed away," the man said, his voice now a low growl. "You wandered too deep, and now you're mine." Mark backed away, his heart racing. The trees around him seemed to close in, their branches like skeletal hands reaching for him. The fire burned brighter, but the warmth had turned to something far more sinister. The man stood, his form shifting unnaturally, like a shadow struggling to hold on to its shape. In a flash of panic, Mark turned and ran, his feet pounding the forest floor, his lungs burning with each breath. But the more he ran, the deeper the forest seemed to stretch. The trees seemed to bend and twist, the paths growing more and more unfamiliar. As Mark stumbled through the woods, desperate for escape, the sounds of the forest faded away. The wind no longer howled through the trees. There was no chirp of crickets or rustle of leaves, only silence. And then he saw it, a large old signpost, half buried in the dirt. He ran toward it, hoping for some clue about where he was. As he got closer, the words on the sign slowly became visible, chilling him to the bone. Asterisk, asterisk. Welcome to Pine Hollow. Rest in peace. Asterisk, asterisk. Mark froze. The words swirled in his vision, and his heart stopped. He turned around to face the forest, only to see the man standing in the distance, grinning, waiting. And then the man spoke again. "You're not leaving, Mark. You never will." Mark screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the forest as the darkness closed in around him. The train hummed along the tracks, its rhythmic sound almost hypnotic as it cut through the inky night. The city was miles behind, the neon lights replaced by the vast dark expanse of empty fields and small sleepy towns. Inside, the train was almost empty, just a few tired commuters heading home from late shifts, each in their own world. Among them sat Daniel, staring blankly out of the window. His work had drained him, and all he wanted was to get home and rest. As the train's gentle swaying lulled him into a dazed stupor, he suddenly felt a strange presence. A figure, pale and still as a statue, had seated itself beside him. The person was dressed in an old weathered black coat, their face hidden beneath the brim of a wide hat. It was odd, Daniel thought. Why would anyone be wearing such heavy clothing on a warm December night? But he didn't want to stare. He turned his attention back to the window, trying to shake off the eerie feeling creeping up his spine. Minutes passed in silence. Daniel could feel the figure beside him, but dared not look. The air felt colder now, the warmth of the train no longer enough to push back the creeping chill. And then, something caught his eye, a movement. He glanced around the train. To his surprise, the few other passengers who had been sitting near them were gone. The empty seats next to him were all unoccupied, the space around him eerily quiet. Had they gotten off at the last station? But there hadn't been any stops. His heart began to race. He looked around again, and there was no sign of any movement. No one. Just the faint clatter of the train's wheels against the tracks. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Excuse me," he said, his voice almost trembling. "Where did everyone go?" The figure beside him didn't respond. The air grew even colder. His breath formed small clouds, though it wasn't cold enough for that. His chest tightened. He looked at the figure now, and for the first time saw their face. Or rather, what was left of it. Their skin was ashen, stretched tight across a skeletal frame. Their eyes were empty sockets, black and hollow. Daniel's stomach churned. He tried to move, but his limbs felt frozen, as if the very air around him had solidified. The figure slowly turned to him, their lips barely parting to reveal a crooked, unnervingly wide grin. "You're next," the figure whispered, the words echoing through Daniel's mind, sending a wave of nausea through him. A low dragging sound echoed down the length of the train. Daniel turned his head toward it, and what he saw made his heart drop into his stomach. The lights flickered briefly, casting the train car in an unsettling, eerie half-darkness. He saw the empty seats around him slowly fill, not with living passengers, but with pale, silent figures just like the one sitting beside him, faces twisted and void of humanity. The train's screeching brakes made the walls tremble, and suddenly, the train was no longer moving. The doors to the car slowly slid open. A cold wind poured in, carrying with it a hollow, distant howl, though there was nothing outside. No stations, no lights, just an abyss of darkness. Daniel opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came. He tried to stand, his legs shaking, but his body refused to obey. His eyes darted to the figure beside him once more. It leaned in closer, its cold breath brushing against his ear, its voice a raspy whisper. "They're all waiting for you," it said. "The train never stops." And as the final words echoed in his mind, Daniel realized with horror that he wasn't just a passenger. He had become part of the endless ride, a soul trapped aboard the Midnight Express, destined to never reach its final destination.